Today I'm going to have a bit of a talk about patience, well, at least athletic patience. I think it was Aristotle that said patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. And I think that's a good metaphor, isn't it? So we live in an era where patience is pretty thin on the ground. In a world of instant dopamine hits and consumerism, we've programmed ourselves to expect almost immediate outcomes, not just in sport, but in life generally. Computers, phones, all the rest of it. It's a land of instant gratification. So unfortunately, endurance sport doesn't work like that. And often I have athletes who come in they come in for one-off preps. They'll do a short prep and then they'll leave. And I'm a coach who'll help people any way I can. But I also know that long-term athletic success is the sum of its parts. It's a long-term process. It's not a stab in the dark. It's not something you can change immediately. It takes consistency, chopping wood and carrying water. So if you're looking at a long-term process with a short-term outcome-driven view, in my opinion, you're headed for trouble, because we can't attack a long-term process with a short-term view, or we end up with a whole bunch of short-term attacks on something long-term that ends up chaotic and busted. So having an athletic vision is great. Not only that, it's a necessity. We need that, but letting the vision drag us along by the bootlaces and becoming attached to it without adequate awareness is not the road to realizing your dreams. You want to stay in flow and in sync with the thing. You have to think about what it is you want. And so we need to be careful that athletic vision doesn't become an athletic obsession, because they're two different things. A vision is a possibility that deep inside we know intuitively that we have the talent to do a certain thing. And how do we get at that? But in the opposite end of the spectrum, an obsession is an attachment that becomes the very definition of our lives when we allow ourselves to be pulled in to something that chaotic. It's kind of psychologically unhealthy. And I've seen athletes in this place. Interestingly, I'm not just talking about elite pro athletes here either. I've seen lots of people who are very attached or even obsessed to an outcome. But that's not the way to achieve it. Obsession has no patience. That's the problem. It has no space. It's congested. And it's a congestion of obsessed mind space that self-perpetuates itself by filling a gap with junk. I'm going to put it out there that, in my opinion, the two critical components for a vision, for a long-term vision, is intuition and drive. They're the two things. And then you've got to mix in the will with that, because you've got to get the job done. It's got to be consistent. You've got to maintain the rage with the enthusiasm. So the issue then is that athletes often misinterpret this drive as obsession, and the drive gets convoluted and becomes obsession. And then we get into strife, and we're actually moving away from the goal that we set ourselves, because we're too attached to the outcome. So obsession isn't very bright. It's drive's not so smart sibling. So when we look at World Cup class athletes, for instance, pumping out incredible training volumes, we're not looking at obsession. We're looking at vision coupled with enthusiasm and an immense drive surrounded by awareness. And awareness is the key factor that brings intuition and drive and will and enthusiasm and motivation and all the rest of it. Vision itself doesn't drive anywhere without awareness. So we always need to be zoomed out, because if we're zoomed in too close, we get too obsessive. Our field of vision closes down. So if there's no awareness in this equation, you're never going to leave the car park, to use a metaphor. We're going to go round and around in the car park and never get any further. Obsession will leave us believing that running around in the car park in circles at speed will get the job done. But it only gets it done short term. It leaves us with short-term satisfaction, but peels us away from the long-term goal. So we lose the long-term satisfaction. with even the smallest amount of awareness, we can see that it's just a BS story, because no one is at the wheel when we operate like that. So it's all about the long-term goal and the moving towards it. Now, this can be a huge problem for athletes because it fills up our awareness with junk. We spend countless hours reading about what other people do and how they got where they were going. And there's endless stories about shortcuts and the fastest way to do something, And there's a multitude of gadgets to analyze what we do, which is great. It's a great tool. And, but it's doing a job on us in a lot of ways, because we're constantly analyzing and judging whether what we're doing is wrong or right. So it's important to get one thing straight. Every single thing you read is an opinion, even the stuff that I write. Or even this video, So the great portal of social illusion that we allow our awareness to be filled with is a space junk that feeds the illusion of obsession. And you don't need to do anything at all other than to be aware of that. So the reality of the vision and the required drive are the modalities that get us to where we want to go. Because if the vision's getting lost in the noise of the obsession, then there isn't enough deep-rooted guttural drive that perpetuates itself in a felt sense through the key athletic element that we call awareness. And that awareness needs to be in place, because on race day, that's what you're going to have. And if you're up in your head on race day, then you're out of sync with the performance. And that's where we need to be mindful. So drive and awareness allow us the other key athletic element called the ability to suffer. If your process is surrounded by judgment, the ability to suffer is hampered. The ability to suffer comes from your ability to accept and not resist what's happening. And that's pretty damn simple, eh? That's really bringing the thing down to the lowest common denominator. And it is simple, It is. You can't learn a damn thing about suffering by reading an article that somebody else wrote about their suffering, because it's not your suffering, or about the latest way to judge that suffering. That's not going to buy you 10 seconds every 5 minutes. It's not going to do it. Or you split your training data onto a nicely plotted graph and allow that to dictate your next move or the every move that you make. It's not enough. It needs to be surrounded by awareness. It's a tool. It's an adjunct to what we're doing. So, and that's true. Like let's just say if you're 10 kilos overweight, what difference does it make? It takes a simple awareness to know that first you have to lose the 10 kilos. So awareness, granted, is a brutal taskmaster. And the intuition and the awareness tells us that a vision takes time, that a vision is a slow burn, that a vision requires guts, and it requires will, and it requires heart, coupled with the word that many athletes these days struggle with: patience. There's that word again, the whole thing. And when you think about patience, when you are patient, you become aware of the fact that you are also aware, that you are mindful. And I get told a lot these days that maybe that's old school, and fair enough to say that. I don't enjoy the car park. I enjoy helping people make the long-term goal a reality, and to unlock the potential in somebody's talent. That takes patience. That takes awareness. That takes mindfulness. That takes a commitment to yourself. Thanks for listening.